That's how we do it.
So we went in and met up with your sister on Saturday and marshmallows.
There we go. Yeah, my mother and father-in-law got me them off of Amazon. They're all Star Wars.
Oh, you can.
Phone.
I don't know.
District Center phone.
Something like that, I'll let Michael know.
So then we took this and Lisa and
Hey, Michael. Welcome to the stream.
This is the streaming?
Yeah, it's called Park Point, and then there's a new hotel.
Awesome.
That Lisa stayed at.
Got my phone.
It's called,
Oh, is that how you did it?
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
so you're
Oh, that's right, because we used to do it from,
We had a webcam,
real
and then we would have the other person join to broadcast the slot.
but there's, well, now you can see the person. That's, I hope that's,
Yes, it's,
that's a good one.
we had a guest.
I think it'll be fine. Like somebody specifically asked for it.
This is great. Should we?
No, my sister did it very well.
I don't know. Can I zoom?
I've never done that before. That
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pop that taste of
I don't want to mess with it just because it took a lot to get it to balance like that. I'll get everybody gathered.
Hey, if you're presenting, why would it kick it in this people?
I don't know.
That's weird. Why would it let you into your computer by just typing root over root? How'd you know that was my password? Oh, it doesn't have to be your password. Oh, yeah, that's right. If you haven't patched OS X in a few months, like literally you can log into just the root in your root. Okay, you don't have to type any password. No password. What is it? High Sierra. For about 3 months. Super cool, man. I want to see if it thinks your face is my face. I saw it.
It knows. It knows we're not twins.
I wonder how it does that if you like have equal twins. It's like, haha. That's true. They probably have exactly to look differently over time. If you're triplets, identical triplets.
You don't know who stole your phone. You have no idea who hacked your accounts. So, real props.
I said biometric thing. No, fine, that's no issue for security. I liked it better because then phone was waking up every 10 seconds. So I'd be like, hey, phone, are you trying to look at me? Connecting with your headphones.
Time's fine.
You want me to set the mic up there at the
Yeah, we could.
I'm just wondering, will this record kind of ambient, whatever, or?
I'm sure it will record ambient. I don't know how well it is.
Well, I'll give her the mic now.
Do you have the mic? Okay.
Hey.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Would you mind switching over to this one? I got this camera set up to record stuff. Thank you.
Glad that you guys all joined us this evening for any event. My name is Michael Jordan, like the basketball player, obviously not easy. Remotely close to that. Little box right there on the cookies that he's doing tonight. Keegan Jones here at Virtual is our man who's helping us set up everything. And we want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, SDG, who hooked us up with the beer. And because I've been to other meetups around town. Not as good as this. How many of you guys is the first night? Time at Angular Men, first time? You know, love your name. It's awesome. That's right. That's awesome. Well, welcome. If you haven't been here, we have a super chill, very laid back kind of meetup, a little bit different from some of the other ones, and that's okay because we just like to, drink pizza, and we eat beer, and we hang out and talk about cool stuff. So tonight we've got some cool stuff lined up. Before we get to it, I want to talk about just a few things. If you missed the thing, Open Source North is tomorrow, so it gets sold out. If you missed it, you should probably start planning for next year. It's an amazing event. There's also Midwest JS coming up in August. So I know that they're still looking for speakers for this, so just some of the organizers are very, very cool. And if you don't, you should still attend because it's an amazing event. Probably the best gathering of JS events here in Css. So check that out. This is a point where we just kind of open up the floor for general announcements. This is anything like, hey, I'm looking for a job, hey, I have a job, I can hire some people. You got something like that, please stand up and just let people know.
Hi, I'm Steve McDermott with DMR. We're an SAP certified partner, and we're looking for a senior Angular developer with a good SQL background because we're growing, and we're excited. We have an office up in Plymouth running 455. So if you're interested in opportunities over in that part of town, come find me and we'll chat about it. So thanks. DMR, Data Migration Resources. Thank you.
Chris Chuck, I work for Polaris Industries. We're looking for an Angular developer, interested in junior to senior. Come see me after if you're interested. We're up in Plymouth, 169 and 494.
We get a free snowmobile to come to work here?
We get to ride sometimes in Colorado.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Well, super excited tonight that we get to hear from Amy Gebhardt. I hope I said it right. She's at Sports Engine. Got to talk to her a little bit beforehand. She's going to be talking to us about component libraries. And we had an interesting conversation before. And one of the things that I love what she said is that different from other problems that we might solve in places that we work, component libraries, unlike any other, have a lot of you've got your typical technical problems, which are just like, hey, these are technical problems, I'm going to figure them out. And then you've got component libraries, which bring along a whole host of people problems. Your work, the designer-developer relationship has never been so strained as in the case of component libraries. And so the fact that you're all here tells me you must be interested in something along those lines. Super excited to hear from you tonight, Amy. So what our plan is, we drink, we've done that. We did the announcements. We're going to get into the presentation, and then we're going to do a giveaway at the end, which is kind of tradition for Angular. So stick around at the end. We'll kind of do some stuff and do some giveaways and stuff like that. For now, we can invite Amy up to come and talk about programs. Welcome, Amy.
that. It works. That's a rare thing. Hi, everybody. How are you? All right, good. Okay, we're here to talk about component libraries together. Before I give any talk, I like to give a few disclaimers. Some details about myself that I think are important, because if I'm ever going to give any kind of generic advice, I think it's important to understand the way that I'm wired, where I'm coming from, and things that might become easier for me may be really challenging for you, depending on how you're wired. If you're wired exactly like me, we should probably be friends. But I have a sneaky feeling that you are not exactly like me. So to start, I'm the lead UI engineer at Sports Engine. That's really the inspiration for this talk, has been my experience doing that at Sports Engine. I'll let you know shortly exactly what this means in just a moment. But my next disclaimer is that I am a chapter leader for Girl Development Minneapolis. Have any of you heard of GDI before? Oh, that's pretty good. Well, we are a national nonprofit organization that exists to provide affordable and accessible opportunities for women to learn how to code. I put it up here as a shameless plug for an organization that I care deeply about. Around the country, we've just reached 100,000 members in 60 cities here in Minneapolis, and we have just under 2,500 members. We've been around for 4 years. But this is up here because you should know that I like to teach. I like to teach people about code specifically. And if I didn't like to learn, I probably wouldn't be in this industry, but teaching and learning sometimes can go hand in hand. So that's one of my disclaimers, is that that's a thing I actually enjoy. It gives me energy. And finally, does anybody like personality tests? Yeah, so I really like Myers-Briggs. It's probably as useful as like, which latte are you? But I like it anyways. I took the Myers-Briggs test when I was a senior in college. It was my last semester of my computer science education. And I took this career-driven one where they give you like years of research and tell you where other people with your personality type have ended up and where they're happiest. And they told me that I would be most unhappy as a programmer. So, challenge accepted. You should know that E stands for extrovert, and when I took this, I think this has changed a little bit, but when I took this, I was as extroverted as one could be on the Myers-Briggs scale. So the thought of writing code on my own all day without people would make me very tired. As much as I liked writing code, I wouldn't get energy from just doing that. So I like people. I like these people problems that kind of come with component libraries. And the other thing, the last thing I want you to know about ENFJ is that is anybody else in ENFJ? Okay. Oh, yeah, nice. There's a couple I rarely meet other than ENFJs. Well, one thing about us is that we get really discouraged without feedback. So whether that's negative feedback or positive feedback, we need somebody to be telling us something along the way. I'll take it all. I don't usually like, you suck. That's not that helpful. But even that is better than no feedback at all. So as we go through this, I just want you to keep those things in mind, especially, again, giving generic advice is kind of hard. And I want you to know where I'm coming from based on how I'm wired. And I also really want your feedback on this afterwards as well. I will take USUP on Twitter. That's not the best way to do it, but I will take it. I really like Twitter. It's really tiny down there, but my Twitter handle is down there as along with Angular. All right, let's get started. So, Sports Engine. Let's see, about 2 years ago, my boss, Carson, who is one of the co-founders of Sports Engine, really just had this idea that it was time that we at Sports Engine create a reusable component library. Carson is a co-founder. He has a fairly technical background, but he's now acting as a principal designer. And I think he had a really good idea for what this could be. He saw the benefits of designers adhering to a design system so that we have consistency throughout our platform. He liked the idea of our engineers being able to build faster with more consistent components throughout our platform. But that's as far as he got, I think, with we need somebody to come in and do this. So they put out a job description that was somewhere along those lines. And I happened to play Ultimate Frisbee with a designer who worked there, and this caught my eye and ended up following through with it. So they had no component library, there was nothing, and I was here to jump right in and just start building something. And this talk tonight, my top 10 tips here are kind of things that I ran into, lessons learned, things that I think went really well over the last 16 months or so. Spoiler, I'm happy to say that we are using a component library. It's in production. I think we're out of that alpha, beta sort of mode. It's a thing that people kind of expect to do. So this is how we got there. Before we go too much further, I really like terminology. I like making sure that we're on the same page when we're talking about things. This may be really unnecessary, but I'm going to go for it anyways. I want to talk about what on earth a component is. I like this article on building component libraries. This is a definition that came straight from that. It was kind of part of my initial research before I began diving into our project at Sports Engine. But a component, I think the way that I want to talk about it, refers to kind of that in between a static HTML element and a whole page. For us, it consists of markup, styles, behavior, tests, documentation, and any other assets. So that's a component for me. Does anybody disagree with that definition of components? All right, keep going. So library, component library is a collection of these. Oftentimes people think of a component library as an application where you can view components within a component library too. In some way to browse and preview the components. That's part of it. That's part of our component library, but I don't consider that exactly. All right, so the first thing I would recommend if you are diving into building a component library, has anybody started the component library project? Are you doing this already? Yay, trying, that's good. All right, is anybody considering it and hasn't started just yet? Okay, all right, awesome. So the first thing I'd recommend is to get to know your users. This is like a standard UX thing. At Sports Engine, I am living on the UX team, which is a first for me. I have always been on engineering teams, and they decided that this one made sense to be with a bunch of UX designers. We have about 70 engineers at Sports Engine, 8 UX designers, 9-ish product teams, depending on the day, and I'm living on the UX team. My users are the developers, right? Who's going to actually be using this? Engineers are going to be using components from the component library. Our designers, I want them to be referencing the component library, of course. Maybe some product folks. Turns out we also wanted design and creative on our marketing side of things. We definitely wanted them to be using this. I spent my first, I would say, 6 weeks or so at Sports Engine just doing interviews. Yay, so many people, conversations. That's fun for some of us. I spend a lot of time sitting down with each individual or a couple of folks at a time and try to learn a little bit about what they think I'm doing there. Turns out my role wasn't perfectly described to every single person in the company, so some folks had no idea what I was doing. Some of them thought I did a little bit of dabbling with HTML, but I was a designer, which was not the case. And it was interesting. I actually asked them, like, what do you think I'm doing here? And they would give me a response like, I think you're here to make things consistent. Okay, that's one outcome, maybe, hopefully. But mostly it was what's going to make this successful for you. I had a product owner who told me that if a year from now, he didn't hear from his developers that they couldn't finish a story because they needed to ask a UX designer a question, that would be successful, that they felt getting UX's blessing on everything was a bit of a bottleneck. So if we could empower his engineers to make design decisions via the component library, that would be successful to him. I hadn't even thought about that before, but that seems like a really good takeaway for me. But again, you are not your user. Get to know your users. What's going to be great? What's a good experience as an engineer to go into your component library and start using these components? Second thing I recommend is to take an inventory of what's currently there. There's a chance you have an application that's already using some kind of styles, maybe some kind of component library, maybe 7 iterations of different themes and styles that your company has been like, yes, this is the one. We're going to use this, and then you hire a new UX designer, and they're like, no, this is the one. We're going to use this new thing. We have a lot of these things. Turns out also that there might be a big disconnect between the code perspective and the design perspective. So we have, I'm trying to think of an example. like our grid breakpoints, which kind of seems like a nice thing from the beginning to be on the same page. We had weird numbers in the code base of what our grid breakpoints were, and our designers were designing to something entirely different. And why are these things never lining up? I don't understand. So I spent a good chunk of time going through our front-end applications that we hoped would use the component library and tried to get a feel for what do we have out there already. Turns out we had like 2 or 3 different design systems that were working and people were using. And it kind of looked like sometimes you could tell one modal was not this one because it didn't have rounded borders, or because the buttons didn't have this weird little gradient on them. And they were small, tiny differences like that. But from a code perspective, the difference is huge in where these different places were coming from. This one, I think I could probably duplicate this slide 10 times and just say, do this. Sit down and figure out what your deal breakers are from the very beginning. The question you want to answer is, if you've attempted this before, if somebody in your team, if somebody in your company has attempted this before, what kept it from being successful? Turns out at Sports Engine, we have tried this many times. Even just the design systems that I mentioned are not even it. They even tried something else on a different level that actually just, it's not even being used anywhere. It was attempted and then it failed pretty quickly. Some things that I learned about why this other attempt was unsuccessful was mostly around versioning. It turns out that versioning an entire library and expecting everybody, all of the applications throughout our platform, to use 100% of the library at some version was going to be a challenge. For us, the most important thing was individually versioned components and being able to identify a custom bundle. So when you think about like, oh, I have a card and I have a tag and I have a button. Well, I only want tags and I want them at version 1.0.2. I guess I'll take icons too, and I want those at versions 2.0.3. On a per application basis, then we can really control what rollout looks like. We can also get our designers to start thinking about these things like versions. And then if we made a system-wide decision that like, hey, you know what, we've decided this isn't, we've decided on all of our modals, we're gonna get rid of that close button in the top right-hand corner, and our users can only do it through a cancel button or something like that. Nobody's gonna make that decision, but if we decided to go with that, we could make that decision, we could build that, we could even have that published in our component library, but then each application could opt in. They're then upgrading their version, they're upgrading their component library bundle, and now we can control that rollout process separate from actually building a component library itself. Towards the end of this, I will, after we get through these top 10, I'll give you a little sneak peek into what we're doing at Sports Engine and show you some more details around what that looks like. But for you, a framework might be a big deal breaker. I know we're all Angular people here. Actually, no, there's at least one React guy. Right? Yeah, there he is. So that a framework might be a deal breaker. And in fact, if you started building this component library once before and you realize that committing all into a framework hurt you, because then if you decide to go somewhere else with another framework in the future, now your whole component library is really committed to this framework. So that might be a deal breaker for you. Lack of interest is huge. If you don't get people to buy into this, you're building components for no, that's not fun. Well, okay, it's still a little bit fun. But you want to actually build a component library with reusable components people actually reuse, right? That's the whole point. So sit down, talk to people who have attempted this before, if they've attempted it before, and try to identify what things went wrong. What are the deal breakers? On a similar note, at some point, you have to determine a tech stack, right? Understanding what's compatible with your current applications. This is first and foremost what's probably going to determine your tech stack. For us, most of our applications are on Angular 1.6, so that seems like a natural place to start for us. But we just started a new application that's on Angular 6, so now our component library has to support both. Try to think about, of course, this is what we do whenever we determine a tech stack for anything, right? We think about how this is going to limit us in the future. We think about where things are now and where do we see them going. And likely this is going to keep changing all the time. Like we just decided we didn't want to use NPM anymore, so we are. Yay, yarn! And the yarn users.
99% of the time, we're saying,
That is exactly what it's like with yarn. Oh man, that hurts a little bit. There's so much truth to that. But then it keeps changing, right? There were so many times that I thought like, okay, this is the version we're settling on. This is what the structure of our repo looks like, and of course that keeps changing. That's fine. Documenting these things is also really helpful. But determining a tech stack that isn't going to paint you into a corner, lock you into a corner, one of those phrases are a thing? No, maybe not. You understand what I'm trying to say. Try not to limit yourself in the future. All right, number 5, as you can tell, I care a little bit about terminology. And I think it's really important as you're trying to communicate with designers and engineers and your users and your product people, that getting on the same page when it comes to terminology is huge. I already did this, right? What's a component? That was really important when talking about the component library with various people involved in Sports Engine, was being able to define what a component is. Is it any Angular directive? Does it specifically have to be something on the UI? And that was an important thing for us to talk about. I have a colleague who kept calling things dual scrollies. Sometimes it was dually scrollies, and he talked about this, and people around him seemed to understand it. And I had no idea what this was. This was very early. And he had a whole gesture that went along with it. It turns out he was talking about the native select box, like a date picker. And you are on an iOS device and it opens up and it's like that scroll wheel. That's what he was talking about. Cool. We don't call it dually scrollies in the component library. This is a huge thing for us. I actually can't tell you, this is a little bit embarrassing, but we spend a decent amount of time talking about names for things, which is, it seems silly, but you want these names to be things that can continue to grow. So when we just created these avatar components, and we created the initial version, last fall, and we called it a persona avatar, but now we have teamed org avatars. So we probably should have just named that avatar, and then we could have had different types that it was. But now if we change the persona avatar name, we've got some breaking changes we have to worry about. So trying to think about these extensible names is really important. What's a drop down? That's another one. Does that mean a select box? Does that mean like a menu? What is a drop out? Does that people? But this is the thing that's definitely important. We have a weekly UX meeting. I'm not a designer at all. I should tell you that, not at all. I might have some instincts for our users, but I'm definitely not a designer. And I get to attend these meetings where our UX designers kind of show off their work in progress, and they talk about it. They give each other feedback. And we had this one component that they kept calling a badge. Now I'm really curious. When I say badge, what do you all think of?
The notification thing?
A notification badge, the thing that's on top of like an icon? Yeah, data, that's right. That's not what we were talking about. If you think of like a label or a tag, maybe like a thing with some words in it, something, yeah. We kept calling them badges initially when we were talking about them as a component, but then I sat on one of these UX meetings and they were all referencing this point in somebody's UI and I kept calling them tags. I was like, well, that's the name of it then, because you guys had this instinct. And you're like, oh, no, that's not a tag. I was like, I think it is. I think that's what you've been calling it without even noticing that you've been calling it. We settled on a tag, and we eventually think that there'll be 2 different versions, static tags, and then tags that have like a dismissible icon or something like that. End of the story there. But naming things, terminology, that stuff is definitely important. All right, this part is really hard too. There we go. I'll hold it like this. At some point, you're going to want to decide and commit to a component lifecycle. What I mean by this is, how does something actually become a component? Is it every Angular directive? Maybe not. You want to think about, how does a component get designed? Is it something that just because a designer came and sat next to me one day and was like, yeah, I want to build this thing, that I just was like, sure, we can build this, and threw it into the component library? What does that process actually look like? When does it become officially ready for development? Who ends up actually developing it? What are the technical expectations? Do you have pretty high standards? Yes, of course you have high standards. It's a component. It's going to be used everywhere. We should make this the most reliable thing in our application. For us, that looks like unit testing, really thorough documentation, linters, paying attention to actual versioning. Accessibility standards should be considered a requirement for every single component that you're building. Internationalization was really important to us. Making things actually responsive on every screen size and doing that from the very beginning. Is SEO something you have to consider? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this process at Sports Engine looks like we have our designers, we spend a lot of time talking. Yay, people, right? We spend a lot of time talking. Once a week, we have a weekly component library check-in. So that's our entire design team. We have 8 UX designers, 9 UX designers. All of our component library contributors. So I own the product, but we have 8 or 9 or 10 front-end developers who consistently contribute to the component library. And myself, we all get into a room and we do kind of like a stand-up of components in flight, whether they're in flight in development or in flight in design. We do kind of a check-in on that. And then we typically have a component of the week that we talk about. So this component usually comes up because a designer is using it, 2 designers are using it, and they just kind of discovered for the first time that they're both kind of doing a pattern that looks the same. Maybe we pick something that we know exists throughout our platform, but we haven't talked about it as a component before, like a file uploader was a thing that just came up. And we tend to talk about it as a group. We talk about how should this behave. We don't really talk about what it looks like. We used to. That's exhausting. You don't want to talk about should it have 2 pixel border radius, how about a shadow, with a room full of 8 designers and 9 engineers. It was a nightmare. But we end up spending some time, we decide basically initial behavior, we talk about some technical risk, and then we talk about how high priority is this particular component. And then we assign a designer to run with it. And that designer is now responsible for creating a design artifact for the component itself, which means they're taking this design out of specific instances and they're taking the first stab at thinking about this as a reusable component. How does this work everywhere? They write down a list of do's and don'ts, they explain what it is, they design it, they create symbols in Sketch that are really cool. I don't know much about Sketch, but these symbols are real fancy sometimes. And then they start to plug in that component in different designs. And they see, like, does this actually do what it does when we design it like this? After that design artifact is complete, it's then ready for development. Usually, depending on the need, that's something that, hey, maybe I get to pick up that thing and I get to work on it. Or there's a product team that needs this component and they've decided to buy story points in their sprint and they're going to have one of their engineers develop a component within the component library, and now it's available for everybody. This kind of goes through our standard development process, lots of code review, lots of unit testing, that sort of thing. And then it officially gets published into the component library, and now it's available to use within our applications, as long as you update your config file, and that's what you're looking for. So this is a lot. This is where we spend a lot of our time. What I just described is our ideal scenario of how a component becomes a component. In real life, it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes we skip that design artifact. Sometimes things don't get symbolized in Sketch. Sometimes there's like a quick and dirty version that lives in the component library that didn't think about documentation, that didn't do all of our accessibility standards, and then we know we need to come back and actually make that component meet all of our standards. We don't want to do things that way, but it happens. Another thing I want to recommend is that you don't forget about your designers. I think when we talk about component libraries and design systems as a whole, of course, we would think about our designers, right? But I think that there are things that we can do specifically for them. What assets do they have? I'm thinking about things like Sketch. Are there symbols? Are there things that we can create for them that actually align with the components that we are building? We use a tool called Abstract. Any of you heard of Abstract? It's kind of neat. They put a fancy UI on top of Git that tracks changes to Sketch files. And it's a really easy way. It creates like a remote repo of a Sketch file. And it's an easy way to share changes and branch off of Sketch files across larger design companies or design teams. That works really well for us. So whenever there's a new component that they're working on, they branch off of our master theme. They create this component. It gets reviewed, and then it actually gets pushed back into master. And it works like we do. And the best part is they're keeping it. They don't even realize it. Actually, they complain about branching all the time, but it's cool and it works really well. But your goal, of course, you want them to be following these standards and all of our component rules, right? And it happens every single week. Somebody did a thing to this thing, and I can just tell you right now that component's not going to support that. There's a reason why that component doesn't support that. It's because we're trying to not let this be a willy-nilly space where anything can go in there. To follow the component, you want to do this sort of thing. I had this, I like teaching. I had this idea that like all I have to do is show them things like the code, and I can teach them like about transclusion, and they can understand the difference of why this can't just go there, and why that's just text. And I can just show them on the component library guide, and I can view the source, and I can show them why it's different. They can me for like 10 minutes on that. They were just like, yeah, just tell me what I can and cannot do. But that actually means sitting down when these sketch symbols are being created and making sure we're on the same page. We, as in the engineers who are building this component, and the designers. Are you building this in a way that I'm building this in a way, and in the same way, and that when you plot this into your different designs and your mockups, we know that it's going to be supported by the component that we are building. Identifying changes to components when they drop in a symbol, if they detach from a symbol, I think is the term. That's the big red flag that's like, ooh, I detached from the symbol. That means I'm probably making a change to the component. And if I'm making a change to the component, I should bring that up in Slack, I should bring that up at a component library meeting, and we should talk about what this change actually looks like and how we can get that developed. Or maybe I'm just using a component wrong altogether. Okay, so step 8, I kind of combined 2 steps. This is like 8A and 8B. The first part here is to propose your plan. So hopefully at this point you've had quite a bit of time to be like, okay, I think this is how we're going to do this. I think I know what the deal breakers are. I think I know what the tech stack is. I think I know how this is going to fit into our process. Then you get a chance to actually propose that plan. For me, this proposal looks like our architecture team, every single product owner, eventually our entire engineering team, and getting all the blessings that I possibly needed. The part B here is to determine a product owner for the project. I don't think that you can do this unless you have somebody actually doing it. Hopefully you have a whole team that can own a component library. But if you're like me, it might just be one person. But it's okay, that's possible. But without that ownership, it's really easy to forget about the component library and like, hey, I just need to get this thing done fast. And right now it's going to be easiest for me to do that in my Meetup project. I don't have time to componentize this. I don't have time to write this documentation. I don't have time to write these unit tests. And unless you have somebody owning every single detail of it and encouraging others to use it, I don't know how successful it's going to be. Trying to get your team really excited about it and committed to the idea. I used bribery. I bought 25 boxes of Girl Scout cookies earlier this year, and oftentimes on Slack, I'm like, hey, I need a code review. I'll give you a Girl Scout cookie. It works really well. I'd recommend bribery. For my team, getting them excited was really like identifying what's getting in their way, what's getting in the, what do they like about the process of working with the component library, what is it that's going to make this successful for them. Think about who this is for, why it'll benefit for them. And again, the idea of the component library becoming this nice to have is just not okay. That's where the owner really comes into play. This isn't nice to have for them, this is their need. All right, number 9. Yay! Be prepared to use the soft skills. You knew this was coming, right? You'll be wearing a lot of hats. Holy moly, I've never worn a product manager hat before. That's fun. People constantly come and sit next to you and tell you what they think you should be working on. There are days where I miss just having a product owner tell me what to work on. They're the ones setting the priorities. I'm in a really great position where I get to work on what I think is most important right now, which is neat, but it's kind of overwhelming. You're always letting somebody down. That part kind of stinks. Not everybody is easy to please. Most people have an opinion on how they want this sort of thing to work, but they aren't necessarily the ones doing it or willing to contribute to the work either. They pop into Slack, into the channel for a second, throw something out there and then they leave, or they pop in and give you this really nice compliment and you wait 30 minutes. It's because they wanted to ask you to do something. Yeah, it's a whole lot like an open source project. So it's hard. It really is. But those soft skills are important, and a lot of times for me, that's like, okay, I hear you. I think that makes sense to get put into the backlog. Here's where I think it falls in the priority list. You can actually go reference that yourself in Jira. You can see where I'm at, where the team's at, and that'll get added to. We'll create a GitHub issue, and if other folks are feeling this pain, we'll make sure that they have an opportunity to say that they're feeling that pain, so that this can get higher on their priority. At the end of the day, I'm a team of one. It's really hard to answer everything they want, and sometimes my goal is to try to convince other people to pick up this thing and work on it, but it's tricky. Of course, like, here's the cheesy line, right? Listen, absolutely, just sit down and listen. Likely they have something really valuable to share with you. Keep adapting, and holy moly, there's a lot of opportunity for education, I learned too. You can have some really, really successful engineers who are awesome at getting to that 90% really fast. But that other 10%, oh no, there are some engineers just don't even see that 10% sometimes. And they look at this piece of UI and they're like, oh, that's perfect. And they really don't see that the UX designer is laying on the floor in pain because this thing has been shipped to production. It kind of happened last week a little bit. But there's a lot of opportunity to educate on how to componentize something. I think that as engineers, of course, we're always thinking about things sort of in this abstract way, but thinking about it from application to application to application, instance to instance. That's where we really got to work with our designers to make sure we're thinking of all these things. And remember that buy-in is super essential to the success of this project. If nobody's using your components. Oh, there's a joke there. Like if a tree falls in the forest, nobody's around to hear it. The component library exists, but no one's around to use it. Isn't even a component library. All right, I'll work on that next time. It was a great joke. Okay, 10. Finally, the last thing I want to share with you, my top 10 list is to respect the creative process. This has been a really hard learning for me. I really like process. I'm a little type A. I really like things to be ordered. I like all of my checkboxes to be checked off. But sometimes it doesn't always work that way. Remove as many roadblocks as you possibly can to let your devs who are good at running really fast in one direction, to let them run, to let them get this sort of thing done, while still making sure that you're meeting your standards and ensuring consistency. Whenever one of my designers is breaking something, they just look at me and smile and go, oh, I'm just innovating. I'm not breaking standards, I'm innovating our standards. And I think that as long as they use that word, it makes it okay. At Sports Engine, we have a lot of devs, again, those like 90% devs, who run really fast. It's amazing how fast they run. And sometimes they need just like a little turn, now run that way, and then they can go and get things done. Sometimes we break our process that I shared with you because it's important to let them run, and the more roadblocks I put in the way, the less excited they're going to be about the component library. It's kind of a thing where you want to pick your battles, adjust your component library cycle. All right, y'all want to see some things? Yeah. All right, well, I have a couple things to show you. I think to start, I want to show you my initial plan proposal. So this was after like 6 to 8 weeks of getting an idea of what I thought I was doing and what I thought our tech stack needed to be, so on and so forth. And it gives you an idea of what my initial vision for the project was. Fast forward, I don't know, like 3 or 4 months after that was my initial like, okay, here's what I've got. And that was a presentation to our entire engineering crew of what was there. Does that sound okay? So we can look at the component library if you really want to. All right, so this was March 2017. This was my initial proposal. I'm going to go through this relatively fast, but I want to give you an idea. I believe in mission statements a lot. I think every decision that I make keeps coming back to me. That's really bright in what we were just doing for a weekend. I like the mission statements because every decision that we make as a team, we kind of circle back to this. Does this fall under the reason why we were building a component library? So have a really great, consistent user experience. Yeah, goes far beyond style. We wanted to accelerate the UI design work. We have a lot of We have like those full stack UX designers who are doing lots of things, and not all of them really like doing UI design work. So we can find a way to accelerate that process for them. Control intentional documented changes to UI elements and patterns. We wanted to create a single source of truth for our design patterns, which meant that end guide needed to be something that was used by engineers and designers. And finally, we wanted to accelerate development and empower developers to make informed decisions about usability. Most developers want to get out. So how we got there, this is how I thought we would get there in March 2017. We're going to build a component library. We're going to define and follow a process, and then we're going to actually create a living style guide kind of thing that a variety of users can reference. Look, these are the same definitions I just shared with you. We talked about what a component was, what a component library is. And this was my where are we now idea. So we have a great front-end development team. Start with a compliment. Our style and functionality was super separate. So our components, I know this is weird, our components were just JavaScript. And all the styles were in a completely separate repository. And they weren't named the same, but they were set. It was very confusing. We had a very flexible definition for shared components. We had over 70 that were sort of identified kind of in one code base. Clearly, we had challenges with versioning and rolling out changes. Our style guide was always outdated. We had lots of duplicate markup, whole huge disconnect from UX development. We had a list of reasons why, which is kind of great. So my high-level proposal to start was to build a component library that exists alongside our current styling, our current design system, following our process, and introducing that guide that includes history, documentation, and examples. Our key features for us, I think the most important one on here was that individual component versioning and ability to build custom packages on the fly per application. Some of these were a really nice idea that didn't actually happen as I'm looking at this now. Consistent requirements and attributes for how a component gets added to this collection. That's definitely true. And get UX to use variables and component names in our mockups. Yay! They all know when we say SE growth 500 what that means. That's exciting. Make it easy, of course. This was what the tech looked like. We created a brand new repository. We were using private NPM packages for each component. We were Angular 1.6 actually components. I proposed initially that if we have to, we can do jQuery plugins. Fortunately, they were like, we don't care about that code base. You just worry about the Angular ones. We built them all in TypeScript, specifically knowing that Angular, eventually we want to get to Angular 6. We're using ng metadata, so we're using Angular 2 decorators, but actually building for Angular 5 components. Sass, of course, other unit tests, super strict winters, etc., etc. I'm going to go ahead and actually skip to now what I proposed to the engineering team. Later down the road, look, it's the same kind of mission statement that was there. Why is this being built? The same kind of definitions again. And this is where things ended up landing. So we have our library that has a bunch of these components, and we have some of our applications, Peacock and Xylo. We were acquired by NBC Sports. Sports Engine is part of the NBC family. Peacock is the logo. Xylo is their old logo. We had two different themes. That's all this is. But the idea was you could pick and choose any one of these from at any version within your application. And then I would go through this like magical block that we called the installer, and it would give you your custom component library. So in the end, our component library ended up being a library, which was a collection of components. The installer application, which was a Node app with build process, is all a step in your build process. That would actually go and create your custom bundle for you. And then the guide is actually the application for viewing the components and their documentation. All right, so again, the library here is just our collection of components. Kind of get an idea, now we're using Yarn, of course. We're hosting everything in a private gem query registry, but the idea is just some sort of private NPM registry. Our components usually consist of tests, some sort of module, some sort of component, styling, their docs, any assets etc. Again, we're using Angular and TypeScript, and metadata allows us to have a really easy upgrade. Since we're now to the point where we also have to support Angular 6, we've got a template upgrading tool. It's pretty hacky, but it works. It can upgrade Angular 1.6 templates so that we can build components for the most part that are using the same exact code for both Angular 1.6 and Angular 6. Testing. Yeah, mostly the good stuff. So the installer, again, that's just a Node application. And the vision and what ended up happening was that each app has basically this SEUI-config.json file. They specify which components they want in their bundle and at which version. These versions kind of follow Alzheimer versioning, so you could do a carrot or something like that. A theme, an app directory. Now we also have an offline mirror that can be supported. We do like all offline installations through most of our build process. And then once you run your build step, you end up getting something like this. Kind of like, I don't know, some sort of log of what actually came out from the request, the version of the installer you were using, you did it. This gets prepended to your CSS and JavaScript that were built. And then, of course, you get your actual files. So if you had any assets with each of your components, if you asked for a CSS variables, it will output those for you, and then your JavaScript and your CSS. And that's pretty much it. So, so this ends up being a component library. This is where we're at so far. It's still pretty small. We still don't have that many in here, but we're getting there. Oh yeah, for pride. There we go. Here's our tags that are badges, that are labels. You know, that very confusing one.
Do you open source?
No. But will we? Maybe.
It's another battle.
Yeah, sure is. But again, we've got our test coverage labeled for each component, what version is currently available for it. At some point in the near future, it will also have usage details, so we can tell you exactly how many times per production this component is being used and at which version it's being used. So when we make decisions, especially as a design team, we have an awareness of what's already out there, who's using this where.
What was your first component?
The first one was the card, actually. This little one.
Why did you choose that first?
Oh, the cards look kind of funny up here. I chose the card because it was pretty easy, and our designers were using it everywhere. And we decided that it was one that the styling of this in the component library looked slightly different than the styling of the cards that we were using in our current design system, that our users wouldn't notice. It wouldn't hurt the user experience for these to exist simultaneously, the old and the new. Yeah.
So what kind of drove you to, there's a lot of like different design systems out there, and so I'm thinking like there's material, and then there's probably like 10 different implementations of material that you can find. Like, so what kind of in your mind like drives you towards developing like custom component library and open source? Just like Angular being open source provides us with so much stuff for free. You know what I mean? The things maybe better, you know, it's free if nothing else, you know. Maybe not be good, but you know what I mean? So what are those differentiators for you to say go down this path versus grab stuff off the shelf?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, why did we decide to reinvent the wheel so many times with these different components? And there's so much that already exists out there, really well thought through design systems, at least from a design perspective. They thought through everything. If you've ever read through, and here's the ones I reference all the time, but material design in particular, if you read through
they're
the
nuts.
details,
They're absolutely nuts.
But those are really hard problems that they have solved. So we're kind of doing it again. We're kind of doing it over, but they have teams of people who come up with these things. For us, there were a few reasons why we didn't utilize some code that already existed. being able to individually version all of our components was important to us. We were a little bit nervous about trying to maintain the version of a dependency that we were using. Some of our components do rely on third-party dependencies. So modals in particular, we decided to go ahead and use a modal that already existed, and we applied our own styling to it. We imagine that with some fancy select boxes, multi-selects, we'll probably research and try to find something that also exists that's out there. So we are using some third-party things, but allowing us to, especially if it's a simple one, be in complete control of what's there was beneficial to us. But it doesn't mean we don't reference these all the time. You want to see the gummy worm? Do you have any guesses what the gummy worm might be? Yeah, these were for RSVPs. The code coverage is not great on the gummy worm. What other questions can I answer?
We're starting to reduce.
Oh, that's a great question. If I were starting new, would I use the Angular CDK? Maybe. So a lot of what we ended up doing, I mean, it's kind of funny. I was referencing a lot of things like that a year ago and trying to see how other people were solving some of these same issues, and ended up writing a lot of things on my own when there could have been other things that we could have been using. But I imagine it has its place going forward, but I don't know. I'm pretty excited about where we're at. I like all of the functionality that's there, but it's never ending. Like, so much of my day is spent on infrastructure and supporting our engineers, and very little of my day is spent actually building components.
You use a CSS library framework, or more than one?
Yeah, we use Sass. We're using SCSS syntax. We follow the BEM styling rules to try to be a little bit more object-oriented CSS, which works pretty well alongside our component library. But that's about it.
Bootstrap?
Nope, all ours. All our own. Yeah.
Balance, so, say the product is like this, and the designers, maybe the designer that's working on the product or something, and how do you manage all that? That's what seems to be most of the challenge. Most of the thing, not necessarily writing this, right? Just
Yeah, the question is, how do we manage some of the political challenges when we have a product manager who's expecting certain functionality, we have a designer who's expecting it to look or behave a certain way, and then we have our engineers who are ready to implement yesterday, and maybe have already implemented something that they thought was a good idea. For us, usually when we get to a point where it's a problem, for example, we had two designers who were building these two things, and they kind of looked similar, but they kind of looked different. It was actually our accordion component, and kind of encouraged the two designers to figure this out. Let's use one thing here. You both might have to tweak your designs to make it work, but I think that there's a component that can solve both of your problems. It didn't really work very well, but just do it. It didn't work great. So we ended up doing kind of like a workshop, and this has become a go-to when we get to this point where we really feel like there's a single solution for multiple problems. We get all of the designers involved into a room. We whiteboard it. We try to identify, here are the things that are similar, here are the things that you absolutely need, and is there a component that can solve both of your problems? And if we think the answer is yes, we write down all of those rules, all of those ideas of how it needs to behave, and then we hand it off to a designer who wasn't in the room. So they don't have something specific that they're thinking of, they don't have that bias, but now they're here are my requirements. They take those requirements, they build a component, and then they try to share that with the designers. And it's worked really well. That's how our accordion component came to be. That's a success story. It doesn't always go that way, but that was a successful one. Yeah.
Instead of on the point
So the question is, how do we do individually versioned components? So every single component is its own NPM package. What ends up getting published to NPM, the package itself is raw CSS and raw TypeScript. Any assets that came through it, I can actually show you just a bit here. So for instance, this is our icon component over here. It's got its own README, its own package JSON, its own changelog. It's got, you know, whatever TypeScript or CSS needs to be there. When we push a change, this is all still in one repository, so all of the components live in one repo. But whenever we push or we create a pull request, we use Travis. Travis runs a bunch of build scripts. One of the first things it does is make sure that everything works. And if it was successful and it's identified that you have made a change to a component, then it will publish a tagged version of your component for your branch name. It goes through code review, it goes through QA, and eventually when it gets the thumbs up, we publish an actual version of it. So what are we on for icons? 3.5.0, we had too many breaking changes with icons. So once these all get published in kind of a very raw state, right, like this on its own is not that useful to a consuming application. That's where that installer application comes into play. So you include some sort of installation step. This isn't a great example because it's doing a bunch of other stuff, but I'm going to show you anyways. The idea is you end up with something like this. You just trigger an install step on this particular module, you give it a config or a path to a config, and it runs it, and that's what eventually, this is doing a lot of things because it's the guy and it's building both things, but whatever. But eventually, it will give you a new folder where you say your out directory was that comes with your JavaScript and your assets. So even though we're individually versioning these very raw components, the installer is what's going out, grabbing everything. It's checking your dependencies because components can be dependent on each other. So icons, for instance, are dependent on 2.1.x. So any minor and patch version increments, as long as it's major version 2. It's managing, it's resolving all of those dependencies, letting you know if you have a compatible bundle. Once it thinks you're good, it compiles transpiles your TypeScript and your CSS, and then gives you your output of a custom bundle. That's for most of the workbooks over the last year. Yeah, for sure. So QA in the component library process is interesting because oftentimes we're QAing something at the component level, not in a specific instance. So we are sending our QA analysts or our developers who are doing QA, which happens sometimes, we're sending them to some sort of documentation page. Some of these are pretty standard in how we're doing it, like an icon, for instance, we now have an idea of like, okay, it should have its primary accent, and these things should turn to the primary color or something else. So we have some pretty standard QA flow, but usually QA is a little bit tough in the component library. We do have a QA step. We also have a UX review step. So not only do you have to have QA signed off, but you have to have a UX designer sign off as well. That component gets published, but then we're actually implementing it into our application. So likely if you were building a component, you have a use case in mind for it. So you built an accordion, now you're actually going back to your project, you're using the accordion that you just built, that you just published, and then there's another QA step on top of that. And sometimes we find issues, and we track those and get the issues. Yeah.
I was curious about training individual version, but I'm wondering about things like, say, when there's a collaboration design team getting the room, stack out to agree. What about being data driven? Is that going to test this 1.0A, 1.0B? What?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what about data-driven decisions, especially if we have UX designers who are not necessarily agreeing on something? We do a lot of prototyping. Is usually we're doing that prototyping before we get to that point, but I could see at some point wanting to have two simultaneous, like 1.0.0, and something's tagged A, something's tagged B, and we actually have the ability to roll that out to our applications and test that way. We aren't doing that, but that's a great idea.
Of your 10 issues,
Of the 10 steps? Ooh, that's a good question. I think, looking back at it now, I think determining the deal breakers was the most important. I remember at one point thinking, we don't have to individually version components, we can do that later. We can always come back and do that. And that would have certainly made some things easier, but I think those deal breakers are deal breakers for a reason, and actually trying to figure out what they are. I think that was the most important thing for us. Anything else from building component libraries that might have something that you would add to the top 10 list, or something you disagree with being on the top 10 list? All right, everything I said is exactly right. It's not, it definitely is not. Yeah, go ahead.
So, we usually package components. Have you had any issues with consumers?
That's a good question. So the question is, with individually versioned components, have we run into something where devs who are using this, consuming applications, are just never updating? Yeah, a little bit. What is kind of a blessing and a curse about the way the components are dependent on each other is that if you request an incompatible bundle, it just won't build for you. So we can't quite do version dependency resolution like you would think NPM does it, because you can't have two of these versions exist. You actually do have to come to a decision. So for example, a lot of components are dependent on the icon component. And likely they're dependent on a specific version of the icon component because icons were added to that component. Alerts, for example, which these all have icons on them, so they have a particular version that they're dependent on. The other day, somebody went to go include alerts in their application and realized, oh shoot, I have to upgrade icons. So they upgraded icons, and when they upgraded icons, there was another dependency, and oh shoot, I have to update that. And that was the first time that this has happened. Like, oh no, please don't hate me. This isn't the best experience. This is working exactly how it should, but please don't hate me. And he's just sitting there going to see my low-risk label on my PR going up. But that actually works in some ways because it's forcing them to be intentional about upgrading versions and making sure that we're not letting these sit forever. I mean, one of our applications, I just did a 4 major version node upgrade, so this is a team where that's going to happen, apparently. And we can't even do these things like letter calls. I know, over there. Anyways, that's another rant for another day. But usually the idea is like, get really excited about the component library. Look at all these cool things that you can use. All you have to do is upgrade to version 1.2.0. And that surprisingly works. Okay, I want to show you something really silly. Now that you've heard what I've been working on for the past year, I'm pretty excited about it. This has been pretty cool. I've got to learn a lot, work with a lot of people, work with a lot of architecture, designer, engineer folks. It's been awesome. And I'm pretty proud of what we've accomplished. I've been talking about it with them for a long time, and I have to show you the thing that they were most excited about, that I got the most positive feedback on, is this email. I'm not even kidding you. This is a monthly newsletter of what's going on in the component library. And this is the thing that people got the most excited about. This is the most people talked about my project in the last year. And it's because they got an email that was like a little bit pretty. And it's not that exciting of an email. But find what works. Find what makes people excited. If a pretty email coming to their inbox gets them excited about the component library, give them a pretty email in their inbox. They're getting another one on Friday because this generated so much excitement. Yes. Yeah, that's not how that works, right? Yeah, we haven't done a whole lot of demos. We're trying to do that a little bit more often, especially because component library is very demoable. If you just built a new component. That's pretty exciting. But for some reason, I don't know why this email was such a thing that, I don't know. We'll see. I'll do another email and see if it gets the same kind of excitement from it. I'm tracking data on that. All right, I think we're about it for time, but I really like geeking out on these things. On Twitter, in person, only in person, an extrovert over here. And I'm curious, especially this is something that you've been working on, ideas, solutions that you have found. I go to time beforehand that they had this really cool thing somewhere where they, in the build process, they took screenshots of each of the components in different browsers, and then they actually did some image comparison to what the UX designer actually designed, so they could tell you that this thing doesn't look like the design should, or that it doesn't match the design, and it actually broke the build. So that's really neat. I'm sure there are lots of things, lots of cool things like that folks are doing. So yeah, whoever want to geek out about component libraries.
Let's give a big hand to our ENFJ. Do some drawings.
I got it loaded.
You got one?
We got our usual 2 front-end masters and IntelliJ license to work. Oh. In order to do that, I have to do this. Start people on my. Oh, wait, look at that. It's still up. Okay. Eventually, the computer will catch up. But like, a bajillion different data processes running. So that's a thing. Okay, our first winner tonight will be Emily. Emily, are you here? Okay. Sorry, Emily. You won, but you don't win. Law. Law, would you like a front-end master sub for a year or an IntelliJ license? Or Gebhardt license? So Gebhardt's license for WebStorm or IntelliJ or PyCharm or whatever their other products are that I don't remember. Or a year's subscription to the video training site from. Okay. So we'll take one of the front-end masters. There's one left. Johnny. Is Johnny without a last name? It's okay. I approved somebody today who made their username 1.21 gigabytes. That was a good one. Greg. All right. What would you like? Front-end masters or Gebhardt's license? Okay. So Greg's got the other front-end masters. James. James here. No. Okay. Greg. I don't think I saw him. Oh, there you are. Okay. You're hiding behind the pole from me. That's why I didn't see you. Do you need a Gebhardt's license? Okay. Greg has thrown Gebhardt's license back in the pool for Daniel. Is Daniel here? Daniel, I think, couldn't make it and wanted the YouTube. Kashi. Sean. Is Sean here? Wow. Striking out. Tony. Is Tony here? Tony the Penguin? Joe Rossiter. Is Joe here? Okay, Joe's got the license. So we got Joe, and then who are my others here? Greg and Locke. Okay. Come see me. Give me an email address, and I'll get you those things. And that's all we got tonight, I think. So thank you very much for coming. You're welcome to stick around and chat a little longer. We'll kick you out at 9 o'clock.
That was a great presentation.
Yeah, I thought Amy did a great job.
Yeah, well, you know.
All right, great. What? Thank you. Oh, wait, you have the, you don't have the zipper places. You have something else. Yes. Okay, good. I got that. Excellent. Hey, how's it going? You have my Jeopardy list. Yep. And what was your name? Joe. Joe. Nice to meet you. Good to see you too.
And so it's like, we can't do that. So it's like,
Here's my long.
Well, yeah, it's serious that.
I don't know.
Yes. Wow. Nice to meet you. What can I get for an email address for you? Yes.
Oh, it's not a big deal. It's even in the.
Cool. I will probably get that up tonight. We usually meet once a month. Usually the first Wednesday of the month. January and July and September or something after that. The holidays. And this month was we met the second week. Yeah, no problem. All right. Now we can end the broadcast.